The North Sea Empire is the name usually given to the historical unified kingdom ruled by Cnut the Great as King of England, Denmark, Norway, and parts of what is now Sweden between 1016 and 1035. It can also be called more specifically the Anglo-Scandinavian Empire. As one historian put it, when the 11th century began its fourth decade, Cnut was, with the single exception of the emperor, the most imposing ruler in Latin Christendom. He was lord of 4 important realms in the overlord of other kingdoms. Though technically Cnut was counted among the kings, his position among his fellow monarchs was truly imperial. Apparently he held in his hands the destinies of 2 great regions, the British Isles and the Scandinavian peninsulas. His fleet all but controlled 2 important seas, the North and the Baltic. He had built an empire. Formation. England. Cnut was the younger son of the Danish king Sweyn Forkbeard. When his father died on 3 February 1014 during an invasion of England, Cnut, who had been left in command of the fleet in the River Trent while Sweyn was in the south of England, was acclaimed by the Danes. However, the invasion fell apart. The men of the Kingdom of Lindsey, who had promised to supply horses for a tactical raid, were not ready before the English nobles had reinstalled King Ethelred, whom they had previously sent into exile. After forcing him to agree to govern less harshly, Cnut's brother Harald became King of Denmark, but with help from Jarl Erik of Norway. Cnut raised a new invasion fleet of his own and returned to England in summer 1015. The English were divided by intrigue among the king, his sons, and other nobles. Within 4 months one of Ethelred's sons had pledged allegiance to Cnut and he controlled Wessex, the historic heart of the kingdom. Before the decisive battle for London could be fought, Ethelred died on 23 April 1016. The Londoners chose his son Edmund as their king, while most of the nobles met at Southampton and swore fealty to Cnut. Cnut blockaded London, but was forced to leave to replenish his supplies and beaten by Edmund at the Battle of Otford. However, following the Danes as they raided into Essex, Edmund was in turn defeated at the Battle of Asandun. He and Cnut struck an agreement under which Edmund would retain Wessex and Cnut rule all of England north of the Thames. But on 30 November 1016, Edmund in turn died, leaving Cnut King of England. In summer 1017 he cemented his power by marrying Ethelred's widow, Emma, although he had previously married an English noblewoman, Aelfgifu of Northampton. In 1018 he paid off his fleet and was fully recognized as King of England. Denmark King Harald died childless in 1018 or 1019, leaving the country without a king. Cnut was his brother's heir and went to Denmark in 1019 to claim it. While there he sent his subjects in England a letter saying he was abroad to avert an unspecified danger, and he only returned to quell incipient rebellions. One Danish chronicle states that the Danes had previously deposed Harald in favor of Cnut, then brought back Harald because of Cnut's frequent absences, until Cnut finally became king permanently after his brother's death. King Olaf of Norway and King Anand Jacob of Sweden, seeing the combined Anglo-Danish kingdom as a threat, Cnut's father Sweyn had asserted power over both their countries, took advantage of Cnut's being in England to attack Denmark in 1025 or 1026. And were joined by Ulf Jarl, Cnut's Danish regent, and his brother. Cnut took Olaf's fleet by surprise and took the battle to the Swedish fleet at the Battle of the Helgeir. The precise outcome is disputed, but Cnut came out best. Olaf fled and the threat to Denmark was dispelled. In 1027, Cnut travelled to Rome, partly to expiate his sin for having Jarl Ulf killed the previous Christmas, partly to attend the coronation of Conrad II as Holy Roman Emperor and to demonstrate his importance as a ruler. He secured relaxation of tolls levied on pilgrims journeying to Rome from northern Europe, and on papal fees for English archbishops receiving their pallium. He also began a relationship with Conrad that led to the emperor's son Henry marrying Cnut's daughter Gunhild, and before that to the emperor ceding to Denmark Schleswig, a strip of ancient Danish territory between Hedeby and the Eider that the Germans had occupied as a buffer zone against the Danes. Norway. Olaf II had extended his power throughout Norway while Jarl Erik was with Cnut in England. Cnut's enmity with him extended further back. Ethelred had returned to England in a fleet provided by Olaf. In 1024 Cnut had offered to let Olaf govern Norway as his vassal, but after Helgeir, he set about undermining his unpopular rule with bribes, and in 1028 set out with 50 ships to subjugate Norway. A large contingent of Danish ships joined him, and Olaf withdrew into the Oslo fjord while Cnut sailed along the coast, landing at various points and receiving oaths of allegiance from the local chieftains. Finally at Nidaros, now Trondheim, he was acclaimed king at the Rearding, and in a few months Olaf fled to Sweden. In 1030, Olaf attempted to return, but the people of the Trondheim area did not want him back and he was defeated and killed at the Battle of Stiklestad, Sweden. After Helgeir, Cnut also claimed to rule part of Sweden, together with England, Denmark, and Norway. He had coins minted either in the capital, Sigtuna, or in Lund, then part of Denmark, with the inscription CNVT Rex SW. Western Gotaland or Blekinge have been suggested. Most England runestones are in Upperland. It was probably either overlordship or disputed rule. Cnut did not have to be present in Sweden to order the minting of coins. Coins were also minted asserting he ruled Ireland, and Swedish history at this early date is very uncertain. Tributary areas in addition to Sweden, of which he or the person who wrote the heading to his letter claimed he was king. Cnut received tribute from the Wends and was allied with the Poles. In 1022, together with Godwin and Ulf Jarl, he took a fleet east into the Baltic to confirm his overlordship of the coastal areas that the Danish kings dominated from the Jomsborg. Immediately after his return from Rome, Cnut led an army into Scotland and made vassals of Malcolm, the High King of Scotland, and 2 other kings, one of whom, Eckmar Catch Mac Ragnail, was a sea king whose lands included Galloway and the Isle of Man and would become King of Dublin in 1036. All these and likely also the Welsh paid tribute, on the model of the Danegeld that Ethelred had instituted to pay off the Danes, and Cnut was thus reasserting the dominion over the Celtic kingdoms that recent English kings had had to let lapse, as well as punishing those who had supported Olaf against him. A verse by the Icelandic Skaldottar Svarti calls Cnut king of the Danes, the Irish, the English and the Islanders. Presumably, Norway is omitted because Cnut had not yet come to power there. Religion. By the early 11th century, England had been Christian for centuries. The Danelaw was in transition from paganism to Christianity, but the Scandinavian countries were still predominantly pagan. Cnut's father, Sweyn, had initially been pagan but in later life had been basically Christian. In England, Cnut assiduously promoted the interests of the Church, and this brought to him acceptance from the Christian rulers of Europe that no other Scandinavian king had previously been accorded. In Norway, in contrast, he built churches and was both respectful and generous to the clergy, but also made allies of the heathen chieftains, and unlike Olaf, did not make laws benefiting the church until his power was on a solid footing. Governance. Early in 1017, probably because he was king by right of conquest not more normal means, Cnut divided England into 4 earldoms on the Scandinavian model. Wessex he governed directly, and of his allies Thorkel the Tall became Earl of East Anglia. Eric Harkonson retained Northumbria, which Cnut had already given him, and Edric Striana became Earl of Mercia, but the last was disgraced and executed within a year. In 1018 Cnut revived at least 2 earldoms in Wessex, and at a meeting at Oxford, his followers and representatives of the English agreed that he would govern under the laws of King Edgar. Anglo-Saxon historian Frank Stenton points out that the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle has relatively little to say about Cnut's reign except a note to his frequent travels abroad, indicating that he was in strong control of England. Thorkel likely acted as his regent during his absences, until they had a falling out and he was outlawed in 1021. The terms of their reconciliation in Denmark in 1023, with an exchange of sons for fosterage and Thorkel becoming Cnut's regent in Denmark, suggests that Thorkel had won them with an armed force. However, it was left to another of Cnut's earls, Siward, to protect his earldom of Northumbria by consolidating English power in Scotland. At his death in 1055 he, not the king, was overlord of all the territory that the kingdom of Strathclyde had annexed early the previous century. He replaced Thorkel as his primary advisor in England with Godwin, an Englishman whom he made Earl of Wessex. While within 3 years of their reconciliation he had also been replaced as regent of Denmark, by Ulf Jarl, Cnut's sister's husband, whom Cnut also made guardian of his son by Emma, Cnut. Ulf in turn proved less than loyal, first conspiring against him with the kings of Sweden and Norway, then making a power play by having the nobles swear fealty to Cnut. Cnut returned to Denmark at Christmas 1026, ordered his house guards to kill Ulf, and it was done in Trinity Church at Roskilde. By the end of his life, he had entirely replaced the Scandinavian inner circle who advised him with Englishmen. In Norway, Cnut stayed into the new year and then left Jarl Erik's son Hakon in charge as his regent, but he drowned the following winter. As his replacement, Cnut sent Svein, the younger of his 2 sons by Eyjolf and thus known as Sven Alfifason in Norway, along with his mother as guardian. They were delayed in southern Norway while Olaf's return was rebuffed, but became even more unpopular than he had been. Eyjolf tried to impose new taxation and stricter controls on a people who valued their independence and especially resented that the new customs were Danish. Cnut also prepared to hand over Denmark to one of his sons. Upon taking power in Norway, he held a great court in Nidaros and proclaimed Cnut, his son by Emma, king of Denmark. As Stenton points out, by appointing different sons his heirs in different countries, he demonstrated that he did not have the deliberate intention of founding a northern empire, which would remain united after his death. It may have been simply the custom of his people. In any event, it was clear throughout Cnut's reign that the weakness of his empire lay in the impossibility of finding loyal and competent regents to govern when he could not be present, and his sons could not hold it together. After Cnut's death, the North Sea Empire collapsed immediately once Cnut died in 1035. In fact, in Norway it was already collapsing. By the winter of 1033, Svein and Eyjolf were so unpopular that they were forced to leave Trondheim. In 1034, the leader of the army that had rebuffed and killed King Olaf at Stiklestad went together with one of the king's loyal followers to bring his young son Magnus back from Gardariki to rule, and in autumn 1035, a few weeks before Cnut's death, Svein and his mother had to flee the country altogether and go to Denmark. Svein died shortly afterwards. In Denmark, Cnut was already ruling as king, but he was unable to leave for 3 years because of the threat that Magnus of Norway would invade to exact revenge. In the meantime, the English nobles, divided between him and Cnut's younger son by Eyjolf Harald Harefoot, decided to compromise by having Harald rule as regent, and by the end of 1037 Ælfgifu had persuaded the most important to swear allegiance to Harald. He was firmly ensconced as Harald I, and Harthacnut's own mother, Queen Emma, had been forced to take refuge in Flanders. Harthacnut prepared an invasion fleet to wrest England from his half-brother, but the latter died in 1040 before it could be used. Harthacnut then became King of England, reuniting it with Denmark, but made a generally bad impression as king. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle said of him that he never did anything royal during his entire reign. He died suddenly in June 1042, as he stood at his drink, at a wedding feast, and with him died the North Sea Empire.